Good evening and welcome to Now This live fact check of President Trump's impromptu briefing in the Rose Garden. We're not entirely sure what the occasion for this event is, but we're going to find out soon. My name is Alan Piper. I am the senior politics producer at Now This. I am supported by our newsroom. We are all working from home, even though New York now has the lowest transmission rate in the country. We are still being extra cautious and staying at home to try to protect ourselves and our community from this virus. We are expecting the President of the United States at any moment, and when he comes out, in fact, I'm just checking my audio here, yes. We are expecting the President of the United States at any moment, and we will attempt to fact-check him in real time. In the meantime, we'd like to use this opportunity to answer some of your questions, so please type them in the comments. If you'd like to tweet your questions at me, I am apiper13 on Twitter, and I will do my best to respond to your questions there. Now, a startling story just broke in the New York Times, and it is particularly startling in light of some of the president's tweets from yesterday. The story that the New York Times broke is that the administration is calling on hospitals to bypass the CDC in the collection of coronavirus data and give that information directly to the Department of Health and Human Services, where presumably there would be more opportunity in having it controlled within the cabinet of having that data, in a good case scenario, having that data more streamlined to be made available, but public health officials worry that this is actually a way for the president to cherry pick the data that is made available to doctors, to hospitals, and to the nation. This would not be that much of a stretch to imagine, given that the President of the United States downplayed the risk of this virus throughout January, February, and half of March, and actually still continues to downplay the risk, even though reporting has revealed that intelligence officials were warning of the threat of this virus as early as November 2019. Now, I'm going to, since this news is so recently breaking and we have not had a chance to fully process it, I'm going to read to you excerpts from the New York Times article. Giving credit where it is due, I want to be very clear that this is the New York Times reporting and the New York Times article that I am reading to you, and not original reporting by NowThis. So according to the New York Times, the Trump administration has ordered hospitals to bypass the Centers for Disease Control beginning on Wednesday and send all coronavirus patient information to a central database in Washington, a move that has alarmed public health experts who fear the data will be distorted for political gain. The new instructions are contained in a little-noticed document posted this week on the DHS website. Cheryl Gale Stolberg reports. From now on, HHS and not the CDC will collect daily reports about the patients that each hospital is treating, how many beds and ventilators are available, and other information vital to tracking the pandemic. Now, I will butt in here and say that this is especially alarming in light of some of the president's tweets yesterday. He began the morning with an early morning tweet storm, tweeting wild conspiracy theories, seeming to side with Chuck Woolery, the former game show host of the not terribly esteemed show Love Connection and a few other shows. Chuck Woolery suggested that the CDC and doctors were lying to the public about the dangers of coronavirus, and the President of the United States retweeted that. And later he tweeted a conspiracy theory suggesting that Dr. Fauci is pushing for people to need an ID card to go shopping at a grocery store. Spoiler alert, there is no evidence around that. Also this week, the White House has been circulating anonymous hit points. Basically opposition research on Dr. Fauci to seemingly discredit him. Now, I would like to point out that Dr. Fauci has not spoken at a public event in Donald Trump's presence since April 22nd. That day, Dr. Fauci contradicted the president in his presence. The president had been saying that the coronavirus would be gone in the fall and that it would go away and people wouldn't have to worry about it, whereas Dr. Fauci said, and I will quote him, "We will have coronavirus in the fall. I am convinced of that." That is the last time Dr. Fauci was allowed to speak at an event presided over by the president in public. They have appeared in public together only once since then, and Dr. Fauci did not speak at the event. I see reporters are putting on their jackets and are sitting down, so I think we can expect the President of the United States at any moment. I am coming to you from my home in the East Village. Again, my name is Alan Piper. I am the senior politics producer at NowThis. I'm going to draw my shade, which seems to be casting a little bit too much light here. All right, I hope that may have improved the lighting situation somewhat. Just one moment more. All right, we are expecting the President of the United States at any moment. It is worth noting that this is a Rose Garden event. The President has often used the Rose Garden events to stage somewhat more theatrical press conferences, and so it'll be interesting to see what he says. Now, I want to use the little time we have left to answer some of your questions. Please post them in the comments. Elise asks, is it safe for schools to open in the fall? Well, that is quite a question that the administration is arguing about. The President and Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, are saying definitively, yes, it is. But the scientific data does not support that. The CDC's own guidelines say that full in-person learning poses, quote, greatest risk, was the language that the CDC used, that it poses the greatest risk for transmission of the disease. The CDC has called upon schools to enact social distancing, to find ways to have students seated 6 feet apart from each other. This seems to be a nearly impossible task. It is important to remember that we have a serious overcrowding population in the public schools. This weekend, the superintendent of one of the nation's larger school districts, the Fairfax County Public School District, which, full disclosure, I am a product of. The superintendent of the Fairfax County Public School District said that in order that typically in Fairfax County desks are spaced 18 inches apart, and that to accommodate seating students 6 feet apart, you would need to expand the physical space allotted for schools to the equivalent of 5 pentagons. If you are not familiar with the Pentagon, it is so vast. It is such a physically vast government building that it in fact is treated, it is referred to as its own city. The President and the Secretary of Education have threatened to cut off federal funds to schools that do not reopen fully 5 days a week for school. Now, it's also worth noting that this is not authority that rests with the President. The President has the power of the purse strings under the Constitution is very clearly rests with Congress. Congress votes on budgets. All budgets begin in the House of Representatives, and it is Congress that decides how money is spent. In fact, the President of the United States has been impeached over a scandal in which he held up congressionally approved, taxpayer-funded military aid for Ukraine in an effort to secure a personal favor from the president of Ukraine, according to the testimony of multiple witnesses. So the president and the secretary of education are threatening to withhold money that they do not seem to constitutionally have the right to withhold. It is also worth noting that the majority of school funding is paid for by local taxes and is paid for at the local level. Now, we can get into a whole matter of how that's inherently discriminatory because it means that rich neighborhoods have tons of money for their schools and poor neighborhoods do not. But the thing is that the federal funding usually comes in to try to make up some of that difference. So even if federal funding is successfully cut off for the schools that are most at risk of being damaged by that withholding of fund are the schools that are already the most strapped for cash. Now, Dave asks, can a sitting president get impeached twice? And the answer is actually yes. Historically, this has never happened. I see that our signal has just dropped out. I believe that is an issue on their end and not ours. It appears to be back. Again, we are expecting the President of the United States at any moment, so please stand by. My name is Alan Piper, and I am now the senior politics producer. I'm attempting to answer some of your questions, and if you tweet them at me at apiper13, I will answer them. Dave was asking, can a president get impeached twice? Yes. Conceivably, it has never happened. President Trump is only the fourth president to ever actually be impeached and was not removed from office. And however, multiple top congressional Democrats have said that it is not off the table. But whether or not the president could be impeached, there is one sure way that a president can be removed from office, and that is via election. So if you are not happy with the way this administration is handling this crisis, you will soon have the opportunity to vote in November to express that. And if you are not happy with your governor, there are some 11 governors who are facing re-election this fall, and you will have the chance to vote for them as well. Excuse me, I misspoke when I said that he was the fourth president to be impeached. He was, of course, only the third president to be impeached. He was the fourth to have the process begin, but President Richard Nixon voluntarily resigned before he could be impeached. And we have never yet removed a president from office via impeachment. President Johnson and President Clinton were both impeached and not removed from office, and Nixon removed himself from office before he could be impeached. So that is the situation there, and excuse me for accidentally misspeaking too quickly. Not Dead Yet on Twitter asks, and I hope all of you are not dead yet, what is the rationale for bypassing the CDC with this data? And the answer there is unclear. Again, this is a story that was just recently broken by the New York Times. I expect that the president will certainly be asked about it in this briefing. It is possible that he will say that it is necessary for streamlining, and it is also possible that he will say that, as he suggested via Twitter yesterday, that he simply does not trust his own CDC. Now, again, my name is Alan Piper. I am the senior politics producer at NowThis. We are expecting the President of the United States at any moment. He is now roughly half an hour late, but we do expect him soon. In the meantime, I'm going to try to answer your questions, so please type them in the comments or tweet them at me at apiper 13 at Twitter. Now, Edward Stevens asks how many states are seeing increases in cases of COVID-19. Shelby, can you please double check on the latest numbers? I believe that 40 out of 50 states are currently seeing an increase in cases at a critical level at multiple states, including Texas, Arizona, and Florida. Now, this is particularly unsettling because Texas and Florida have both announced that they will be resuming in-person classes in their schools as if nothing is happening, and they are, in fact, two of the most heavily hit states by the coronavirus. And so that is quite alarming, especially in the case of Florida, where the school year begins in August. So they're looking to begin in-person classes within weeks. Shelby Vacklin in our newsroom is double-checking to see if it is still 40 out of 50 states where the disease is on the rise. Most of us at NowThis are located in New York, the state that for a long period of time was the epicenter of the coronavirus pandemic. Our state suffered 30,000 deaths, but has now become the state with the lowest rate of transmission. Now, there are some important lessons you can learn from New York. I prayed that the rest of the country would learn those lessons and not insist on experiencing what New York went through firsthand. But one of the things that the president likes to say, and repeatedly says, which has been demonstrated to be false, is that the only reason we are seeing a large number of new coronavirus cases is because the large number of testing. This is false. Medical experts have explained that increased testing will find more cases, but it will also find, what is important to look at is the rate of positive cases. If it were true that coronavirus is under control and that we were only spotting new cases because of new testing, we would see a very large number of negative tests versus positive tests. Now, New York State is currently conducting more tests than any other state in the country. But New York State is not finding more cases. In fact, over the last 7 days, the positivity rate in New York has been an average of 1.1%. 1.1% of all of these tests are coming back positive. That is a good rate. Dr. Ashish Jha of the Harvard Global Health Institute says that you want to have the number of positive tests, the percentage, be under 3%. The World Health Organization has said anything over 5% is unsafe for normal operation of a country. But the total U.S. positivity rate over the past 7 days has been nearly 9%. Nearly 9% of all of the tests that are being done are coming back positive. And that is in spite of the fact that there are still not actually enough tests being done to see where we are. Now, in some states, that rate of positivity is much, much higher. Over the past 7 days, the average rate of tests that came back as positive in Arizona were 26.5%. That is a startling, alarming, frightening result. And in Florida, where, as I said, the in-person classes are expected to begin in a matter of weeks, the positivity rate is 18.7%. And now here is the President of the United States. My team and I will work to fact-check him in real time.
Thank you very much, everybody. Please. Hope it's not too hot, but it's pretty warm. Thank you. So, we've had a big day in the stock market. Things are coming back, and they're coming back very rapidly, a lot sooner than people thought. People feel.
The president likes to suggest that the stock market is the strongest indicator of the economy. The majority of Americans do not own stock, and while a healthy stock market can help raise all boats, it does not change the fact that we are experiencing record unemployment. The current unemployment rate is roughly 11.1%, and while this is a decrease over the historic rate from last month, it is still higher than at any previous point since the Great Depression.
Which I signed this afternoon unanimously through Congress. This law gives my administration powerful new tools to hold responsible the individuals and the entities involved in extinguishing Hong Kong's freedom. We've all watched what happened. Not a good situation. Their freedom's been taken away, their rights have been taken away, and with it goes Hong Kong, in my opinion, because it will no longer be able to compete with free markets. A lot of people will be leaving Hong Kong, I suspect. And we're going to do a lot more business because of it, because we just lost one competitor. It's the way it is. We lost a very, very serious competitor that we incentivized to take a lot of business and do well. And we gave them a lot of business by doing what we did. We gave them things that nobody else had the right to do. And that gave them a big edge over other markets. And because of that edge, they've done really historic business, tremendous business, far bigger than anybody would have thought years ago when we did this gift. It was really a gift to freedom. Today I also signed an executive order ending U.S. preferential treatment for Hong Kong. Hong Kong will now be treated the same as mainland China. No special privileges, no special economic treatment, and no export of sensitive technologies. In addition to that, as you know, we're placing massive tariffs and have placed very large tariffs on China. First time that's ever happened to China. Billions of dollars have been paid to the United States, of which I've given quite a bit to the farmers. And
this is not true. If you have been watching these fact checks, you know that whenever the president talks about these Chinese tariffs, he is either lying or simply does not understand basic economics 101. Tariffs placed on goods from another country are not paid by the other country. They are paid by the domestic importer. J.P. Morgan estimates that the tariffs that have been placed on Chinese goods have cost the average American household $1,000 each. Again, it is Americans who pay these tariffs and not China.
The world is a different place, but we're now getting back, and one of the reasons the market's doing so, it's almost at the point that it was at prior to the plague. Almost. We're getting very close. It's a great thing. It's an amazing thing what our people have done and what they've endured. No administration has been tougher on China than this administration. We imposed historic tariffs. We stood up to China's intellectual property theft at a level that nobody's ever come close. We confronted untrustworthy Chinese technology and telecom providers. We convinced many countries, and I did this myself for the most part, not to use Huawei because we think it's an unsafe security risk. It's a big security risk. I talked many countries out of using it. If they want to do business with us, they can't use it. Just today, I believe that UK announced that they're not going to be using it. And that was up in the air for a long time, but they've decided. And you look at Italy, you look at many other countries. We withdrew from the Chinese-dominated WHO, and we fully rebuilt the United States military. The WHO, World Health Organization, we were paying close to $500 million.
So the president has repeatedly misrepresented what has been happening with the World Health Organization. Medical experts and diplomatic experts are shocked and astonished that the U.S. would withdraw from the World Health Organization in the midst of a global pandemic. And it is important to note that while the president has blamed the World Health Organization for the spread of this virus, they declared an emergency 6 weeks before he did.
150 million people as opposed to 1.4 billion people. And the world trade is terrible. That deal is terrible. And the World Health is a terrible deal. We've been very tough on the World Trade Organization, and we've been, I guess, as tough as you can get on World Health. We withdrew our money. We told them we're getting out. Doesn't mean that someday we won't go back in. Maybe we will when it's correctly run, but they made a lot of bad predictions, and they said a lot of bad things about what to do and how to do it, and they turned out to be wrong.
This really is not true. The World Health Organization seems to have had as accurate information as was available. Again, I want to highlight the World Health Organization declared a global emergency 6 weeks before President Trump declared an emergency. On January 9th, the World Health Organization reported and began sounding alarms about this disease. That day, President Trump held a rally. On January 10th, the WHO issued comprehensive guidance with advice for countries on how to detect, test, and manage potential cases. On January 23rd, the World Health Organization held an international news conference laying out all that it knew about the disease, which corresponded with what seemed to be known from other health experts at that time. At that time, Chuck Schumer called for a national public health emergency, and President Trump did not go for it. On January 24th, Trump defended China, saying that China had been working hard to contain the coronavirus and that the United States appreciated their efforts and transparency. On January 30th, the World Health Organization declared a global health emergency, and President Trump held a rally. On February 3rd, the World Health Organization released a strategic preparedness response plan. On February 6th, the World Health Organization began distributing 250,000 tests around the world. The U.S. refused. Around this time, the CDC produced a total of 90 tests, which turned out to be faulty. So it is demonstrably false to say that the World Health Organization provided worse guidance to the U.S. than the president's own administration did.
Years and years and years and decades. And then all of a sudden they joined the World Trade Organization, and they went like a rocket ship.
The president has repeatedly falsely suggested that China was not a successful or growing economy prior to joining the World Trade Organization. This is not true. It actually was a rapidly growing economy well before it joined the World Trade Organization, and that was what enabled it, in fact, to join the WTO.
For a country to have, few countries have it, but the United States doesn't have it. Never did. Probably never even asked for it because they didn't know what they were doing. As Vice President, Biden was a leading advocate of the Paris Climate Accord, which was unbelievably expensive to our country, would have crushed American manufacturers while allowing China to pollute.
All right, so the president seems to be having trouble saying the word pollute. He actually has said something true here. He has said that Joe Biden was a proponent of the Paris Climate Accord. What he said that's false is that the Paris Climate Accord would have destroyed the U.S. economy. Actually, numerous economic experts have come forward with evidence that the long-term impacts of the climate crisis pose a risk of devastating the U.S. economy. Just in a speech today, Joe Biden was highlighting that the efforts to fight climate change are actually pose one of the greatest opportunities for job creation that the U.S. has seen in a long time. So many clean energy jobs have no ability to be outsourced. The installation of solar panels cannot be outsourced. They have to be physically installed here. The building of wind turbines is not something that is cost effective to outsource. Many economic experts have highlighted that the infrastructure investments of clean energy pose great opportunities for job creation, and that the risks of the climate crisis pose grave risks to the long-term economy.
In factories. He wrote something today, and he made a statement today that I wrote down, pretty accurate. So Biden was here for 47 years, 8 years, the last 8 years, not long ago, as vice president, he said, 1 in 5 miles of our highways are still in poor condition. Well, we're doing a good job on highways, but why didn't he fix them 3 years ago? Why didn't he fix them? Tens of thousands of bridges are in disrepair and on the verge of collapse. Well, it's probably not a right number, but we have bridges that should have been fixed. Why didn't he fix them? He was there for 8 years with President Obama. Why didn't they fix them? Tens of thousands of bridges. This is what he wrote. High-speed broadband. We want high-speed broadband. Well, why didn't he get it? 3 years ago is not a long time. And he didn't do any of the things, but now he says he's going to be president. And as president, he's going to do all the things that he didn't do.
President Trump is highlighting something important here. The Obama-Biden administration didn't do many things that it sought to do, that it tried to do, because the power to pass laws rests solely within Congress. And Republicans in Congress were very successful at blocking legislation that the Obama-Biden administration sought to pass. That is why so much of what the Obama administration accomplished was done by executive order. It is worth highlighting that President Biden is proposing, Vice President Biden is proposing big ideas. He is proposing a $2 trillion investment in clean energy. President Trump is proposing big ideas. He is proposing completing a border wall that will cost hundreds of billions of dollars. If you want to see either one of these candidates deliver on their promises, it's important to send them the Congress that will enact these things. And this is not a value judgment. One of the main reasons that the wall has not been fully built is that Democrats have stood in opposition to the wall. If you want to see the wall built, you should send Republicans to Congress. But if you want to see the infrastructure investments and the clean energy investments that Joe Biden was proposing today, you should work to, in addition, elect that candidate, also elect members of Congress who will support that agenda.
Statements. I made the statements before. I told you what generals told me about our military. And I'll make them again. If somebody needs them, we'll give them to you. Very well documented. As vice president, Biden opposed tariffs, and he was standing up for China. He didn't want to do anything to disrupt the relationship with China, even though China was taking us to the cleaners.
Okay, and it is true that Vice President Biden opposed tariffs. Actually, the majority of economists oppose tariffs. These are really seen as sort of an 18th century economic tool. As I said, tariffs on foreign goods are not paid for by the foreign country. They are paid for by the U.S. importer. And the tariffs that President Trump has placed on Chinese goods, as I've highlighted, have cost the average American family about $1,000 each, according to J.P. Morgan, which is not some liberal think tank.
Too, they all thought what I did was a terrible mistake. We would have lost, in fact, Dr. Fauci said he would have lost thousands of additional people if President Trump had to do that. And I was a crowd of one, because even experts didn't want to do it. They thought it was a mistake. And then I did Europe when I started seeing what was going on in Italy and Spain and France and other countries in Europe. I did a ban on people coming in from Europe. That would have been disastrous for our country also.
Okay, so President Trump is again falsely taking credit for imposing a ban on travel from China and saying that he did it on his own, that no one else wanted to. This is false. In fact, at the time that the decision was made, HHS Secretary Alex Azar said it was made following the uniform recommendations of the career public health officials here at HHS. But it is worth noting that it did not come early, as President Trump said. It did not, in fact, go into effect until February, and that even after it went into effect, it was not a total ban. Some 40,000 authorized travelers continue to arrive in the U.S. following these travel restrictions. Dr. Fauci supported the travel restrictions, but never said that they saved thousands of lives. And Dr. Jennifer Nuzzo, an epidemiologist at Johns Hopkins, has specifically said we have not seen any evidence that shows that the travel restrictions stopped or slowed down transmission of the virus.
And they stopped very early on testing. They totally stopped it. They just said stop. And frankly, if we didn't test, you wouldn't have all the headlines because we're showing cases. Now, we have just about the lowest mortality rate, but if we did, think of this. If we,
okay, there is a lot that's being said here that's false, but it's coming so fast, so I'm just going to come back to some of these things in a moment.
The cases, if we did another, you cut that in half, we'd have yet again half of that. But the headlines are always testing. Now, the testing is a good thing, but at the same time, it's fodder for the fake news to report cases. So we're doing 40 million plus, going to be very close to 45 million people. And when I turn on the news, I see cases, cases, cases. They don't talk about deaths being cut down to a level that actually tenfold they use. I got that from one of the very respected media outlets, tenfold. Cut tenfold.
So again, the president is falsely claiming that the reason we are seeing more cases is only because of more testing. Again, this is false. This has been discredited by medical authorities. The important thing to watch is the rate of positive tests, and the rate of positivity is going up. We are seeing more cases because we are having more cases. More testing does not reveal more cases when the number of cases is going down. And the proof of that is New York, which is doing more testing than anywhere else in the nation, and yet only 1.1% of those tests are coming back positive. Anything over a 3% positivity rate is bad news, according to the Harvard Global Health Institute. The U.S. rate is about 8%, and it is above 26% in many states. The president also falsely says that we have the lowest mortality rate. This is not true. We have more deaths than any other country. Although we account for only about 5% of the world's population, we account for about 25% of the world's deaths. And in deaths per capita, we are in the top 10.
We could have used it for other people. They could have used it instead of sending our seniors back into nursing homes that were infected, where you lost thousands of people. Thousands of people in New York died because of poor management by the governor. And it's a very sad thing to see, and very sad to watch, and very sad to look at those statistics. But we have an incredible Javits Center that we built with thousands of beds. I think it was 2,800, all ready to go. And they could have sent people there, or they could have sent senior citizens there instead of sending them into the nursing homes. And after all of that work and getting it done, the Army Corps of Engineers, I mean, the job they did was incredible. They built it in a matter of days. When it was all completed, FEMA, everybody was there, doctors. We ended up getting doctors. They said, we can't man it. I said, so we'll man it and woman it. And that's what we did. We brought in doctors, nurses, everything. We're all set. We said, where are the people? They didn't send the people. Very few people came in. They could have sent them into the Javits Center. They could have sent them to the hospital ship, which was virtually unused, but we were there. By contrast, my administration acted very early to ban travel from China.
Okay, again, it was not early. Some 39 other countries had stricter bans earlier or around the same time.
The federal government to fight the China virus and to keep our people safe.
It is not a China virus. This is an offensive term to describe it, and hate crimes against Asian Americans have been documented to be on the rise since the president began using this term. Viruses do not have nationalities, and the CDC and the World Health Organization advise against labeling them in such a manner.
Of preparing for delivery because we feel very certain it's going to be there. But logistically, we have our military ready to go. We have generals that's all they do is distribute things, and they're going to be distributing hopefully a vaccine or a therapeutic, and it's coming out really well. And I think you're going to have some good news very, very quickly having to do with the vaccines. We're also working with many other countries on the vaccine. Many countries.
We are actually working less with other countries because we have pulled out of cooperations with the World Health Organization. We also were set back in our efforts to develop a vaccine when Dr. Rick Bright, who was heading the U.S. efforts, was fired. He says as retaliation for contradicting President Trump's claims about hydroxychloroquine. And the majority of health experts believe that it is unlikely that we will see a safe and effective vaccine before next year. And they are concerned when President Trump makes suggestions that one will be available this year, because we have seen this administration behave recklessly with untested medicines like hydroxychloroquine.
I think bad, just the opposite. His son walked out with $1.5 billion of money to invest, where he'll make hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe millions of dollars a year. Walked out with $1.5 billion. I asked one of the biggest people on Wall Street, maybe the biggest, is that possible? He said no. He's never seen it. They don't do that. But Hunter, where's Hunter? Where is Hunter, by the way? Hunter Biden walked out with $1.5 billion.
The President of the United States is attacking the son of his political rival and is suggesting that Hunter Biden benefited from the fame and notoriety of his father. It is worth noting that President Trump inherited his fortune from his father, lost it, was bailed out by his father when his casinos were going bankrupt, and President Trump's own children, his daughter is a White House official despite having no experience in public policy or government, and his son-in-law, who has no experience in emergency health management or diplomacy, is managing much of the U.S. response to the coronavirus and is orchestrating a plan for peace in the Middle East, supposedly.
Those founding ideals, and yet he enthusiastically stated that China is a great nation and we should hope for its continued expansion. Well, we all wish well to China, but what China's unleashed on the world, it's hard to even fathom. I see people now, friends of mine, they walk up, they want to say hello, and they have to keep their distance, and they're all covered up like you're all covered up with face masks. It's a different world, but we're coming out on top.
We are not coming out on top. We are coming out on top. We are on top of the world when it comes to total number of coronavirus cases and total number of coronavirus deaths. The U.S. has lost 136,000 people to this terrible disease, and over nearly 3.4 million Americans have been sickened by it.
Platform that would demolish the U.S. economy, totally demolish it. So we built the greatest economy in the history of our country, greatest in the history of the world.
It is simply not true that the economy under President Trump was the greatest in the history of the country or in the history of the world. It actually was growing faster under President Obama. More jobs were added in the last 3 years of President Obama than the first 4 years of President Trump. And real wages, when adjusted for inflation, in fact, have been declining in the past few years.
Ever. Stock market highest ever in history. We had 143 days of all-time stock market highs in just less than 3.5 years. And we had
It is true that the stock market did hit record highs during this administration. But it also faced record drops, and it grew at a faster rate under both President Obama and President Clinton.
Now they want to do something that's much different, Joe Biden. So I've watched this, and I've watched it with great interest. We're building our economy again. I guess the stock market went up almost 500 points today, or something thereabouts. You'll check, but it was up a lot when I left. And our economy is coming back. We're almost at a level where, even though it's long before the very important, maybe the most important ever, election of November 3rd, we're long before that, but we're close to record stock markets again, and NASDAQ hit an all-time high for the 16th time.
Now, again, the stock market is very important if you are a wealthy stock market investor. It does have impacts on average Americans, but less substantial. What is a bigger impact is jobs and wages. And as I've said, wages, real wages when adjusted for inflation, have been falling for the past few years. More than 22 million jobs have been lost, and unemployment is at about 11%, which again is an improvement over last month, but still before that you'd have to go back to the Great Depression to find such a high level.
But would cripple American industry while greatly helping China. He wants to impose massive energy taxes and job-crushing mandates to eliminate carbon from the United States economy. Let him define the word carbon, because he won't be able to. Obliterating American oil, clean coal, natural gas, and the natural energy resources that supply countless American jobs. Joe Biden put AOC, a young woman, not talented in many ways, in charge of his energy plan.
Well, it is not true to say that AOC is in charge of the plan, but her guidance was sought. But it is a false choice to suggest that fighting the climate crisis, the president has frequently put things that actually coincide in apparent opposition. He has claimed that we have to choose between fighting the virus, saving lives from the virus and saving the economy, and he's suggested that we have to choose between helping the economy and helping the environment. You cannot have an economy without an environment, just as you cannot have an economy without healthy human lives. The Fourth National Climate Assessment, published in 2018, warned that if we do not curb greenhouse gas emissions and start to adapt, climate change could seriously disrupt the U.S. economy. Warmer temperatures, sea level rise, and extreme weather will damage property and critical infrastructure, impact human health and productivity, and negatively affect sectors such as agriculture, forestry, fisheries, tourism. The demand for energy will increase as power generation becomes less reliable, and water supplies will be stressed. Damage to other countries around the globe will also affect U.S. business through disruption in trade and supply chains. A government report from President Trump's own administration, 13 agencies in November 2018 raised the prospect that a warmer planet could mean a big hit to GDP in the coming decades. President Trump said that he did not believe the report that his own agencies put out.
Immigration detention. No more detention. You come in here illegally, no more detention. Stop all deportations. So if we get a MS-13 gang member, which we've taken out of our country by the thousands, brought them back to Honduras, Guatemala, can't do that anymore. El Salvador, can't do that anymore. Stop all deportations. So in other words, we'll take all of these people, many of whom are in prison for rape, murder, lots of other things. And prosecution of illegal border crossers. Oh, okay, they come in illegally and we have to stop the whole process. Support the deadly sanctuary cities where many of these people are protected.
So there are a lot of false statements being made, and it is hard to get to them all, and I'm trying not to just talk over the president. Living in a so-called sanctuary city, a city with one of the lowest crime rates per capita in the nation, it is important to highlight that these so-called sanctuary cities do not see greater crime than other cities, and in fact, studies by the conservative Cato Institute show that the presence of immigrants in a community lowers the crime rate. It doesn't increase it, because immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than citizens born in the U.S. That goes for immigrants regardless of whether they are documented or undocumented.
Biden and Obama used to bring killers out. They would say, don't bring them back to our country. We don't want them. Well, we have to. We don't want them. They wouldn't take them. Now with us, they take them. Someday I'll tell you why. Someday I'll tell you why. But they take them, and they take them very gladly. They used to bring them out, and they wouldn't even let the airplanes land if they brought them back by airplanes. They wouldn't let the buses into their country. They said, we don't want them. I said, no, but they entered our country illegally, and they're murderers. They're killers in some cases. And they said, nope, we don't want them. They'd turn the bus around, they'd turn the plane around, then they'd land in the United States, and who knows what happened to them. But it wasn't good. Taxpayer-funded lawyers will be given to all illegal aliens, so we're going to pay...
So, again, there is a lot going on here. I want to highlight, this is an official White House address. This is not a campaign event. This is a White House address in the Rose Garden with the presidential seal, with the presidential press pool summoned. It is not normal. It is not a normal thing for a president of the United States of either party to use an event like this to attack a political opponent the way this president is doing. It is also not normal to vilify immigrants the way he's doing. And again, I want to highlight that an institution no more liberal than the conservative Cato Institute has found that immigrants are considerably less likely to commit crime than native-born citizens.
Of Mexico, great guy. Friend of mine, become a friend of mine. A lot of people thought that couldn't happen because we're very opposite in terms of our views, maybe even in terms of our temperament, but he's a great guy and he's a friend of mine, and they've been terrific. Mexico has been terrific. 27,000 soldiers on our border, Mexican soldiers. And we have great, great numbers. We get rid of so many different things. Catch and release is gone. So many different things have taken place. We used to catch them, take their name, and release them into our country. We don't do that anymore. We now release them back where they came from. Sometimes we'll bring them back to their country. Grant work permits for illegal aliens. So if you come in illegally, you get a work permit. People that live here don't get work permits in many cases. Provide...
I'm not sure what he means, people that live here don't get work permits. Also, the president has routinely suggested that when people such as asylum seekers come here and are given court dates to make their asylum claim, that they don't show up for them. But Trump's own Justice Department says that 90% of asylum seekers show up for trial. And it makes sense, because they're not coming here to live in the shadows and be scared. Asylum seekers come here to seek asylum, and they are eager to go to court and make their case heard.
Community college. We're going to have every person in the world pouring into our country from all over the world. And by the way, the wall was so timely, because it stopped people coming in from heavily infected areas of Mexico.
This is blatantly false. The U.S. has more than 13 times the number of cases of Mexico. The U.S. had coronavirus before Mexico. The states bordering Mexico, the U.S. states bordering Mexico, together have more than double the cases of Mexico. To suggest that the virus is coming into the U.S. from Mexico is preposterous. it is clearly the case that the U.S. poses a greater virus risk to Mexico than Mexico poses to the U.S.
We've done a great job, get no credit for it, and I don't want the credit. I want the people that have done this great job, the people that have done such an incredible job on building the ventilators and doing the testing and building a testing platform that's been amazing. We have many platforms. Many companies have come up with different forms of tests. When we started, there was no such thing.
There is still a shortage of testing, and where there is not a shortage of tests, there is a shortage of devices to analyze the test material. We have direct reports of members of our own newsroom in hot-button states who have had to wait over 10 days to get results of tests. Now, if you take a test and have to wait 10 days to find out if it's positive, the test isn't particularly helpful. It's hard to see what can be gained from the test if you have to wait that long, because by the time you get the results, you may have been exposed to the virus again, or unless you have been quarantining on principle for that entire 10 days, you have been possibly spreading the virus without knowing it. And it is because of our lack of ability to process the number of tests needed.
End requirement, think of that, for immigrant self-sufficiency. And remember to maximize welfare. So we give it a maximum. Then we have massively expand immigration during a global pandemic, taking jobs from unemployed Americans. End all travel bans, including from jihadist regions. So now we have travel bans. A lot of you said I didn't get the travel ban, and you were wrong. We got the travel ban. We lost in the Ninth Circuit. We lost again in the Ninth Circuit, and then we won in the Supreme Court. We have a very strong travel ban. And we don't want people that are going to come in and blow up our cities, do things. And frankly, with the liberal Democrats running the cities that we do have, where they do have problems, maybe they wouldn't mind, but I would mind, and the people of this country mind. So listen to this. End all travel bans. He's talking about the ban that I won, that everybody said I didn't win. They said I didn't win because in the lower court we lost, that we lost.
There is a lot going on here. President Trump is suggesting that banning immigration will be good for the economy when we're trying to create jobs. Immigrants, in fact, start small businesses at something like twice the rate of people born here. But I need to share with you some breaking news. We have very little information at this time, so I advise against becoming too alarmed until there is more information. But the Associated Press and the Washington Post are both reporting that Ruth Bader Ginsburg has been hospitalized with possible infection after experiencing fever and chills. This is a developing story, and we will continue to update you on it.
On the DACA decision, I'll be able to do vastly expand low-skilled immigration to the United States. So they want a lot of people come in with low skills. I like merit. Think of that. Vastly expand low-skilled immigration to the United States. These are the things that are in the plan. This is Biden. Biden's gone radical left. Increase refugee admissions by 700%. Huh. That's a lot. By 700%. Nobody's ever heard of such a thing. Increase refugee admissions by 700%. Abolish law enforcement as we know it.
Okay, the president is flat out lying about many, many things, including suggesting that Joe Biden is seeking to abolish law enforcement. No one is seeking to abolish law enforcement. The most aggressive proponents of the defund the police movement are calling upon a reframing of our budget priorities. Joe Biden has said that some of the money that is spent on law enforcement should be better spent on other things, so that things that police address now, often mental health issues, often issues that would be better dealt with by a social worker or a doctor, that there can be more social workers, doctors, mental health professionals to address those by devoting less of the budget to the police. But no one, and certainly not Joe Biden, is suggesting abolishing the notion of law enforcement.
Long time, but sometimes you use the death penalty, depending on the crime. You know what happened today with regard to the death penalty. Appoint social justice prosecutors in order to free violent criminals. So they want...
No one is trying to free violent criminals. We have a mass incarceration problem in the U.S. We incarcerate more people than any other country, more people as a raw number and more people as a percentage of the population. The majority of incarcerated people are incarcerated on nonviolent drug charges. No one is seeking the release of violent criminals who are currently a risk to the community.
Polish our police departments. They want to abolish our prisons, I guess. Incentivize jail and prison closures as populations decline. Ensure the resources saved are invested directly into those communities. So they want to close them rather than have them for some very bad people, people that are not going to behave when they get out. You see that in New York. They allowed a lot of criminals out, and those criminals are causing havoc. And then they got rid of their incredible and legendary crime squad. And bad things are happening in New York.
This is not true. I am speaking to you from New York. Per capita, one of the safest cities in the world. New York did undergo bail reform. New York had a bad system where people where innocent people were held in jail for years. Under our system, if you have not been convicted of a crime, you are supposed to be considered innocent. But we had a cash bail system where many people awaited trial. People who had not been convicted of anything awaited trial, sometimes for months, sometimes for over a year, imprisoned, losing their jobs, losing their apartments, without being convicted of any crime. New York underwent bail reform and has released people who were not seen as a risk to the community, people whose only reason for being held would be an inability to pay the bail, and there has not been seen to be a correlation between that release and any increase in crime. There has been an increase in shootings in New York, and but research does not see any correlation. The people who have been released on bail have not been tied in any way to these shootings. What there seems to be is other factors that are taking place. And again, the crime rate in New York remains historically low.
North Dakota, Pennsylvania, you're going to be too happy with that, and many other states. Ohio, mandate all 500,000 school buses and all 3 million government vehicles be changed to zero-emission vehicles within 5 years. I've heard of worse than that. Install 500,000 taxpayer-funded charging stations nationwide. Here's a bad one, really bad one. End school choice. There is nothing that the African-American community wants more than school choice. And mothers and fathers are going to be very happy to see him be defeated just on that alone. End school choice. So Joe Biden wants to end school choice, end tax credit scholarships serving disadvantaged students in 26 states, oppose 14 million Americans with education savings accounts, and get rid of school choice, having to do with school choice. Eliminate school choice in Washington, D.C. You know what they've done in Washington. They have some incredible example right here. Example. I know of one example. I think they have a number of them, but one is incredible. Abolish all charter schools. Charter schools are doing great. Ban funding for charter schools in poor neighborhoods. We don't want charter schools in poor neighborhoods. Well, that's not fair. Abolish educational standards. Abolish in the suburbs. You're going to abolish the suburbs with this. Enforce Obama-Biden's radical AFFH. That's the AFFH regulation that threatens to strip localities of federal affordable housing funds unless they change their zoning laws to fit the federal government's demands. So what you have, I mean, I've been watching this for years in Westchester, coming from New York. They want low-income housing built in a neighborhood. Well, I'm ending that rule. I'm taking it out. So I spoke with Ben Carson the other day. We're going to be taking it out. I've watched that whole thing go, and now they want to make it twice as bad in the suburbs. In the suburbs. Mothers aren't happy about that. Fathers aren't happy about that. They worked hard to buy a house, and now they're going to watch the housing values drop like a rock, and that has happened. Drop like a rock. So we're not going to do that. We're going to do the exact opposite. Probably there has never been a time, and this is just a few, it's much worse than that. We did this very quickly. It's probably never been a time when candidates are so different. We want law and order. They don't want law and order. We want strong...
The president is saying he wants law and order. This just comes days after he commuted the sentence of convicted criminal Roger Stone, a criminal who was found guilty of 7 felonies, and the president has commuted his sentence. The president has attacked the FBI and suggested that Robert Mueller and his team were, quote, dirty cops. It is an odd statement for him to be trying to phrase himself as the defender of law and order just days after setting a criminal loose.
Did so much because they will go over to a section where there aren't people, not an entry point, and they'll make a left into the United States. They're on their way. They can't do that anymore. We have a 30-foot wall that goes 6 feet into the ground. It stops a lot of the tunneling because they're pretty good at tunnels. But we watch the tunnels, and we have equipment for that. But you can't make a left anymore and come into the United States loaded up with human traffic. So they want to take down the wall. They want to have open borders. Think of open borders today, though, with the pandemic. I mean, the timing is sort of interesting, but with the pandemic. So there's never been a time when 2 candidates were...
So the president is falsely suggesting that Joe Biden is in favor of human trafficking. It is worth noting that the Trump administration removed funding for legal services for trafficking survivors and also changed the rules to make it more likely that the trafficking survivors, the people, the victims of the crime, would be more likely to be deported and returned to the circumstances that led to their trafficking.
The single biggest difference, if you want law and order, for instance, I enacted recently when I saw all that was going on with federal monuments. We don't have the right to do states, although we're trying to find it. But with the monuments where they wanted to rip down Andrew Jackson, they wanted to rip down George Washington. They were actually heading over to the Jefferson Memorial, if you can believe that.
There is no evidence that anyone was seeking to do any harm to the Jefferson Memorial.
Right now, many, many people in jail all over the country because they tried to destroy or in some cases got it down, a federal statue or monument. We haven't had anybody making a move since I enacted this. I signed an executive order.
It really is remarkable that at a moment when tens of millions of Americans have lost their jobs and 136,000 Americans have died from a virus that they are still at risk of, that the president is putting so much emphasis on defending statues. The statues in question, he is not using the word Confederate, but let's be clear that when the president talks about defending statues, he is talking about defending Confederate statues, defending statues of traitors, of treasonous people who took up arms against the United States in defense of the indefensible institution of enslaving human beings.
And we said, we're going to do something. We can't let this happen. Now, it could be removed at some point. You go through a process, a legal process, go through Congress, whatever. I understand that. At the same time, some people like these statues and monuments, but it can be removed, but you have to go through a legal process. So they were going to have 20 to 25,000 people that night. Nobody showed up. Nobody. You know that because you were disappointed to see that. The next night,
I'm sorry, I had to look away for a moment, but the president talked about thousands of people were expected, nobody showed up. I'm assuming this is a reference to his rally in Tulsa. I'm coming back to you with some more information, though.
So there has never been an election where we've had this kind of difference. We want strong borders. Without borders, you've heard me say it 1,000 times, without borders, you don't have a country. They don't want to have borders. They want to have open borders. It's radical left, and it'll destroy our country. 20 years ago, Venezuela was a very rich country, one of the richest anywhere. Per capita, one of the richest, tremendous oil reserves. Now they don't have water. They don't have food. They don't have medicine. We do everything we can to take care of the people, but they have nothing. And that's exactly the ideology that you have going over here. If I wasn't there...
This is just simply a lie that the President of the United States is telling, suggesting that Joe Biden is ideologically the same as Venezuela. This is a lie. He knows this is not true. Joe Biden is a mainstream candidate. Many progressives are dismayed that he is too close, too centrist. Many progressives believe that he is too centrist. Many conservatives believe that he is too liberal. One could debate where exactly would be the appropriate place to put him on the spectrum, but suggesting that he is on a place on the spectrum akin to Venezuela is just a willful, knowing lie. These are false statements that the president is making.
With Trump signs, American signs, you've got the Trump Pence sign all over. You look at what's going on. You look at bikers for miles and miles riding up highways proudly with their signs. Look, we won a race where it was the same thing, 2016. We had polls that were fake. They turned out to be fake. Not all. A couple of them got it right. 3 of them.
The president uses the term fake to mean anything he doesn't like. Now, it is absolutely true that polls incorrectly predicted how 2016 would turn out. The majority of pollsters believed that Trump would lose both the popular vote and the electoral vote, when in reality he only lost the popular vote, but still managed to squeak out a win in the electoral vote. But that does not mean that the polls were fake. That just means that they were inaccurate.
Miles from Maine, I just opened it up, and I just got rid of tariffs in China, and we're working on European Union, which charge our fishermen tariffs. And I said, you're not going to do that. So we freed it up for Maine. But if you take a look, we went up there recently. There were crowds, thousands of people lined up going over to a factory where we were opening up for. We're making swabs, a beautiful big new factory making swabs. I think that the enthusiasm now is greater, and maybe far greater than it was in 2016. I think a lot of people don't want to talk about it. I think they're not going to say, hey, I'm for Trump, I'm for Trump. They don't want to go through the process. And I fully understand that because the process is not fair. The media doesn't treat us fairly. They never have, and perhaps they never will.
The President of the United States is boasting about his crowd size, and he is complaining that the media does not treat him fairly. It just is essential to put this in the context of the fact that in the past 4 months, 136,000 Americans have died, and tens of millions have lost their jobs.
As you know, they announced 2 weeks ago record job numbers, almost 5 million people. And that beat the last month, which was also a record, 2.8 million people.
So the president is boasting about the number of jobs that were created, the number of jobs that came back in the last 2 months. And it is true that those were record-breaking numbers of jobs coming back, but that was only possible because of the record-breaking job losses leading into it. And unemployment still remains over 11%. It is very strange to celebrate as if it is an achievement that some of the jobs that were lost came back at a moment when a record number, an unprecedented number in American history, an unprecedented number of Americans are without jobs.
Tremendous fraud if you do these mail-in ballots. Now, absentee ballots are okay, because absentee ballots, you have to get applications, you have to go through a process. If I'm here and I vote in Florida, you get an absentee ballot, but you have to go through a process. Absentee ballots are great.
Well, he's describing a distinction without a difference is the term you might use. Absentee ballots and mail-in ballots are the same thing. The president is falsely suggesting that that mail-in ballots leads to increased voter fraud. There is no evidence of this. Oregon, which is the pioneer in mail-in voting, has sent out more than 100 mail-in ballots since 2000 and has documented only about a dozen cases of proven fraud. Voter fraud is extremely difficult and extremely rare, and it is not made easier by mail-in voting.
I want to know, when's the last time you spoke with President Xi of China, and do you plan to speak with him in the near future?
No, I haven't spoken to him. Well, no, I don't. I have no plan to speak to him. Yeah,
And
please go.
do
you want to do a follow-up?
Yes,
Okay, yeah. Is it okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I just wanted to know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was hospitalized today with an infection. Wanted to know if you had any reaction to that news.
No, I wish her the best. I hope she's better. I didn't hear that, actually. She was just hospitalized? No, that's too bad. No, I wish her the best. She's actually giving me some good rulings. Okay? So you know that, right? People were surprised. No, I wish her the absolute best. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. So you were mentioning the travel bans, and I wonder, when do you plan to review that? Because the European countries are in the situation is under control, much a better place than the U.S., and there is no ban for other hotspots like Russia and India. So what will be the criteria to change that? And another question.
Well, you know, we banned for Europe, and at some point that'll come off, and we're dealing with them all the time. The relationship's very good.
Well, actually, what we're seeing is the reverse, is that the Europe is not allowing the U.S. to come to Europe, and they are wise not to, because whereas this disease seems to be largely under control in the European nations where it was first spreading, despite having advanced warning, despite having more time to prepare, the U.S. has done a less good job of responding really than any other country by almost any metric you can think of.
Our police, and we're not going to make our military small and weak, because probably, or at least at top of the level, we need our military right now. Yeah, go ahead, please.
So how do you think that the America First policy can work during a pandemic? Aren't you concerned that this could actually damage the U.S. and make China more influence around the world?
Okay, look, my policy is America First. We've lost hundreds of billions of dollars a year with China and many other countries. And what we're doing is just handing everybody everything. It's just sad. I've watched it. I've looked at it. We did the U.S.-Mexico.
So the president repeatedly says that we are losing hundreds of billions of dollars to China, and he seems to be referring to the trade deficit. And this seems to suggest that he does not understand what a trade deficit is. President Trump has repeatedly used language suggesting that the trade deficit is money owed to the U.S. by China. It simply means that the U.S. purchases more goods from China than China purchases from us. And this is largely because the Chinese goods are cheaper. President Trump says this is taking advantage of us. I have never seen someone walk into a store and complain that they were being taken advantage of because the goods on sale at the store were too cheap.
Request now, and are you taking tangible actions to ensure that U.S. investments don't continue to fund defense firms in China?
And you'll see more coming. This was a very important bill that we signed, but you're going to see more coming over the next short period of time. But yes, we don't want them investing in Chinese military companies. Okay.
Letters. I mean, what actions can be taken to ensure that does not happen?
Well, you have a lot of actions we can take, including the increase. You know, right now people don't know China's paying a lot of tariffs. We made a China deal, and they bought just, I think.
China is not paying tariffs. I don't know how many times I can say this. Tariffs on Chinese goods are paid for by American. These tariffs that President Trump is so proud of having imposed are essentially taxes on Americans. J.P. Morgan estimates that the average American family has paid about $1,000 each as a result of these tariffs because of the price of goods rising. If you have less money in the bank at the end of the month than you used to have, it is in part because of President Trump's tariffs on Chinese goods, which are not paid for by China, never have been paid for by China, do not represent an introduction of money into the U.S. by China. That is not what tariffs are. That's not how they work.
To that amount of money, to that exact amount of money, 28. It was 16 billion. And it was 12 billion, 28 over a 2-year period. And we gave $28 billion to our farmers. That's why they're all here. And now they're doing very well. Our farmers are doing very well because we made really great trade deals. USMCA just kicked in. The China deal, they're buying a lot. They are buying a lot. We'll say that. They're buying a lot.
So the money that was given to these farmers to help the farmers make up for the lost income due to Trump's trade war with China. Again, this money did not come from China. This money came from American taxpayers. Farmers received a U.S. taxpayer-funded bailout to lessen the pain caused by the trade war that President Trump started with China. International trade and economics are complicated. They're complicated things, and President Trump repeatedly has suggested that they are simple things, and that the leaders who have made trade deals in the past made them because they were stupid. Trade is complicated. Any trade deal signed has pluses and minuses, and certainly there is a lot that can be condemned by trade deals made by previous administrations. But one thing that virtually all economists can agree on is that launching a trade war without a strategy is as destructive to an economy as launching a shooting war without a strategy is to human life. So the president has walked out now. I did not have a chance to hear the last question that was asked based on the way he was shaking his head. I suspect that he walked out in anger when asked a question that he did not feel was an appropriate question for him to be asked. So that is the end of today's briefing by the president, and it was really a shocking and startling event. I don't know how many times I can be shocked and startled by behavior by this president, but you'll see that is the presidential seal. It is a reminder that this is an event that was happening at the White House. This was a presidential event. This was not a campaign event, and yet this was roughly an unrelenting 1-hour-long attack on his opponent, largely largely making false statements about his opponent. I am being told by Shelby in our newsroom that the thing that I missed at the end is that he plans to sign a very big merit-based immigration action. He's calling it both a bill and executive order. It's not a bill. Bills start in Congress. It could be an executive order, and we will have to wait to see what happens there. So that is what happened today. The president made a wide variety of false statements. We were not able to catch all of them because they came so rapidly. One true statement that he made repeatedly is that the differences between him and his opponent could not be greater. And it is important that everyone recognize that. It is tempting. It is very tempting to imagine that if you don't totally agree with either candidate, that they are identical. But the truth is that they could not be more different. The president talked about his poll numbers. He talked about the unfair treatment he believed he received from the press. He talked about how he is the law and order candidate. I've asked Shelby to put in the comments on Facebook of this video a summary of some of the people from his team who have been confessed or convicted criminals. It is a startling number of people in Trump's inner circle, his own personal orbit, who are all confessed or convicted criminals. If he is the law and order candidate, and if he is not himself complicit in these crimes, he has been very unlucky in his selection of a campaign chair and campaign advisors and close friends and associates. My name is Alan Piper. I want to thank you for tuning in. This has been NowThis Live Fact Check of the President. Two of the facts that he did not want to talk about are that nearly 3.4 million Americans have become sick from the ongoing pandemic, and over 136,000 Americans have lost their lives. That is something that should weigh heavily on everyone. It does not seem to be the subject matter that President Trump likes to devote his press events or his Twitter feed or his public statements to, but it is the fact and the reality of the world that we are living in. I urge you to stay safe. I urge you to follow the guidance. Please take your public health advice from figures like Dr. Fauci and not figures like game show host Chuck Woolery. Please wash your hands. Stay 6 feet away from other people. Wear a mask in public if that is what your local public health officials are advising. It is a sign of respect for yourself and for your community. Thank you for tuning in. I want to thank the whole NowThis newsroom, particularly Alex Rubinowitz and Shelby Vacklin and other members of our team who have been working from home to bring this broadcast to you. Stay safe, stay well, and I'll see you soon, I hope.